Hey guys, tonight we travel deep into a forgotten place, a village not marked on most modern maps, nestled between rolling English hills and a patch of ancient forest known only by those who live nearby. This is Bramble Hollow, a place where the fog clings to tree trunks long after morning, where the air seems heavier than it should be, and where silence feels intentional. Tonight's story is slow and winding, like a stream moving through the woods. It's not just one tale, but many, gently folded together through decades. Stories of children gone without a sound, of old trees that murmur at dusk, of paths that circle back when they shouldn't, and of something deep beneath the soil, something watching. There's a detail tonight you might miss if you drift off too soon, one that explains why, even if you were just visiting Bramble Hollow, you probably wouldn't survive a full night near its center. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Bramble Hollow has always seemed suspended in a sort of stillness, not abandoned, not broken, just paused. The trees sway gently, but the birds don't sing. The paths are lined with ivy, but no one walks them anymore. Time here moves sideways. The few remaining villagers say little. They nod politely to newcomers, but their eyes never linger too long. They say children used to laugh in these fields. That laughter grew quiet over time. First, fewer families stayed. Then fewer children were born. Eventually, the village school shut its doors, its final bell left unrung. What no one talks about, at least not in the open, is why. It started so long ago that even the oldest resident can't say when it began, but all will tell you the same thing, in their own way. Once, a child vanished, and then another, and then more, always in pairs or alone, never with a witness, never with a sound. They'd simply be gone. The forest to the west, Bramble Hollow, has always been the quietest place in the village. Its name appears in no documents before the late 1700s, and its trees are older than any living soul. Yet something about it resists age. Stones remain unweathered, roots twist in ways that don't seem natural. Light bends strangely there, like it's being filtered through memory, not mist. No one builds near the edge of Bramble Hollow anymore. Homes closest to it were abandoned first. Gardens turned to thistle. Fences collapsed, and no one rebuilt them. But Bramble Hollow remains, waiting, breathing, and it's where our story begins. It was the autumn of 1912 when Elsie Wren disappeared. The air had just begun to shift, that delicate in-between of summer's warmth and the whisper of winter's breath. The leaves along the border of Bramble Hollow glowed in hues of copper and crimson, like the edge of a glowing hearth. Elsie was 8, a quiet child, often seen tracing patterns in the dust with a stick, or humming tunes no one recognized. Her mother often said she had a head full of clouds, but there was a lightness to her that charmed the neighbors. She never strayed far,
and she never wandered past the moss-covered stones that marked the boundary where the village met the hollow. Until the day she did. That morning was clear. Elsie had eaten toast with jam and skipped out the door before her mother could braid her hair. It wasn't unusual. Elsie loved the woods, the sound of the wind curling through the branches, the rustle of unseen creatures. But that morning, something was different. A neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, remembered seeing Elsie walking toward the edge of the forest, her steps unusually slow, as if listening for something. Then she paused and tilted her head. She was humming again, but this time not to herself. Mrs. Donnelly swore she heard it too, though faint. A melody coming from the trees, soft, slow, and unlike any bird song. Elsie followed it, barefoot now, her shoes abandoned near the old gate. She was never seen again. The search began within the hour. Men combed the woods. Dogs barked and strained at leashes. The church bell rang longer than usual, drawing everyone who could walk. But by nightfall, not a single footprint, scrap of fabric, or broken branch could be found beyond that first clearing. It was as if Elsie had stepped through the world itself. No one wanted to speak of the old tales. Not then. Not the ones that warned of music in the hollow. Not the ones about the stones. Elsie's mother never left Bramble Hollow. She aged quickly, hair fading to gray in less than a year. She died before her 50th birthday, sitting on the porch facing the forest. Her last known words, "She's just on the other side. I hear her humming sometimes."
After Elsie, the air in Bramble Hollow changed, not in temperature, but in tension. It was subtle at first, like a string drawn taut behind the scenes. People walked a little faster near the woods. Children weren't allowed out alone, especially not near dusk. And yet, as the decades passed, the pattern continued, quietly, persistently. The village didn't speak of it, not in public, but behind closed doors, names were whispered and dates were recorded in private notebooks, passed down like unspoken warnings. 1954, another girl, this time 11. 1973, two brothers, aged 6 and 9. 1981, a toddler vanished from a picnic. And in between, others. Gaps in the family albums, school pictures missing a smile or two. Always during the same season, late September to late November. Always near the boundary stones. Always children. It was the stones that began to draw more attention. Weathered and lichen-covered, there were 12 of them in total, circling the outer edge of the forest. No one knew who placed them there or when. Some thought they were older than the village itself. Others believed they marked something sacred or sealed. Each disappearance happened within a day or two of someone disturbing a stone, leaning on it, climbing it, once even trying to dig beneath one, as if the hollow responded, as if it noticed. Villagers developed a kind of unspoken rule: do not touch the stones. By the 1980s, the schoolhouse had closed, and the village population had halved. Young families no longer moved in. Birth rates dropped. Some claimed it was the economy. Others, privately, said Bramble Hollow simply didn't want children anymore. Still, no one could explain the disappearances. Police records were sparse and often incomplete. Case files went missing. Photos yellowed and crumbled, even in sealed boxes. More than once, families reported photographs where a child simply faded from the image, not torn or edited, just lightened, until only the background remained. The disappearances weren't just events, they were echoes spreading outward. The village festivals stopped. The playground rusted. Laughter became a memory, not a sound. And Bramble Hollow remained, untouched, unyielding, and entirely too quiet. At the westernmost edge of the forest stands an ancient oak, broad, knotted, and impossibly tall. Its branches stretch out like fingers, too long for its own frame, and its bark is dark as soot, even in full sun. Locals call it the Whispering Tree. No one planted it. There are no records of its age, but it appears in sketches and paintings dating back hundreds of years, always exactly where it stands now. Some villagers claim it looks the same in every image, as though it hasn't aged a day. The name, of course, comes from the stories. Those who walk near it after dusk say they hear it. Faint murmurs, never loud, never distinct, just enough to suggest words that hover beyond recognition. Some say the tree speaks in children's voices. Others say it sounds like wind pushing through brittle pages. It's always quietest near the tree. Even the insects avoid it. In the 1960s, a traveling botanist visited Bramble Hollow. He'd heard whispers, not from the tree, but from other researchers, intrigued by reports of unidentifiable flora in the region. He took bark scrapings, soil samples, and dozens of photographs. He stayed 3 nights. On the 4th, he was gone. His belongings remained in the inn. His notebook lay open, the last page half written. The ink trailed off mid-sentence. The tree almost hums when I'm close enough. I think it... The tree was never examined again, not officially, but the stories kept growing. A child's toy found at the base of the trunk, even though no child had lived nearby in years. A woman swore she saw her sister's red ribbon caught high in the branches, twisting gently despite still air. Most who live nearby know better to approach it now. But those who do, those who stand too close for too long, often return with a strange look in their eyes. Quiet, detached, as if listening for something far away. And some don't return at all. The Whispering Tree is not mentioned in any tourist guides. It doesn't appear on maps. And yet, for those who find Bramble Hollow, it's almost always the first thing they notice.
because even without knowing its name, the tree has a presence, ancient, unmoving, and aware.
In 1954, something unusual happened. Something that gave the village a flicker of hope, though it quickly turned cold. A boy came back. His name was Thomas Allcroft. He was 10 years old when he vanished from behind the village chapel, where he'd been helping collect apples with his younger cousin. One moment he was tossing pebbles at a squirrel in the hedgerow. The next, he was gone. Searchers scoured the fields and forest. The cousin, barely 6, said only that Tommy walked into the trees when the music started. No one knew what to make of it. No one found a trace. And after a week, the search was called off. Then, 3 days later, Thomas returned. At dawn, a farmer found him standing at the edge of the wheat field nearest the hollow, barefoot and staring up at the sky. His skin was pale, his hair damp with dew, and his feet coated in black soil, the kind found deep beneath the roots of old trees. He didn't speak. Not that day, not the next. It would be over 2 years before he said a full sentence again. He was taken home, bathed, fed. The doctor noted he was in perfect health, though thinner, and with scratches on his arms and legs consistent with brambles or thorns. But his eyes were wrong. People said they seemed older. He didn't react to loud noises. He didn't smile. But he drew. Constantly. Hundreds of sheets filled with swirling black shapes, concentric circles, hollow-eyed figures half hidden in trees, and the boundary stones, always 12, always surrounding something blurred in the center. No one could make sense of it. One night, Thomas began screaming in his sleep. His mother ran into the room to find him curled in the corner, pointing at the empty wall, whispering over and over, "It watches, under the bones, under the bones." After that, the drawings stopped. He grew older, quieter, moved away in his 20s, changed his name, and never returned. But before he left, he gave one final interview to a local paper. It was never published, but the transcript, later found in a dusty archive box, contains a single quote. "I don't know where I went. I just know I wasn't alone, and it never blinks." Thomas Allcroft is the only child known to have returned from Bramble Hollow, but many believe he didn't return whole. In the spring of 1977, a cottage at the far edge of Bramble Hollow was set to be demolished. It had belonged to the Darnley family, caretakers of the chapel for nearly a century, until the last surviving member passed away alone in 1963. No one had entered the building in over a decade, its roof sagging, ivy creeping through the windows like patient fingers. The demolition was halted when workers found something in the attic. Tucked beneath a warped floorboard, sealed in a wax-lined wooden box, were letters, dozens of them, all written in the same careful hand. They were addressed to someone named E.D. and dated between 1886 and 1891. The author signed each one simply A. The letters were never delivered. At first, they seemed like love notes, poetic, full of longing. But as archivists read further, the tone darkened. They spoke of watchers beneath the field and the sleep that must not be broken. One line, repeated in different forms across several letters, stood out most. If the children walk the circle, the ground will split again. Some letters referenced songs sung at twilight, not lullabies, but offerings. Others described rituals involving bramble branches tied in knots of 3, placed beneath the whispering tree, each full moon. It seemed absurd, the ramblings of someone unraveling, until a historian cross-referenced the dates. In the span of those 5 years, 3 children were reported missing in the village. One had vanished during the harvest festival, the very night a full moon rose. Another disappeared near the stone circle. The third, a shepherd's daughter, was last seen weaving flowers into wreaths, 3 of them tied with red thread. The connection was too precise to ignore. More chilling were the final 2 letters. In them, A speaks of a pact, a promise made by our ancestors to keep the hollow fed, to lull the old one into slumber, to give it only what it's owed. The final letter ends mid-sentence, but I fear the children no longer hear the tune. If they stop listening, it will... No signature, no conclusion, just a smear of ink. The box was quietly archived. Most villagers never heard about it, but one detail still lingers, passed down among a handful of those who worked on the demolition. When the crew returned the next morning to tear the cottage down, it was gone. Only the stone chimney remained, standing alone. The ground beneath it had caved in, revealing a hollow space lined with 12 perfectly round stones.
Beneath Bramble Hollow, the earth is not solid. In 1986, 2 amateur hikers from a neighboring town wandered past the old forestry signs, drawn in by the strange quiet of the place. They weren't local, hadn't heard the stories. They were following a deer path when one of them, Mark Ridley, stepped on a patch of moss that gave way under his weight. The ground beneath him collapsed. He fell nearly 10 feet into darkness, landing on damp, uneven stone. His companions scrambled for help, and within hours, emergency services had secured the area. What they discovered wasn't just a sinkhole, it was an opening into a vast natural cavern system. Explorers and researchers were brought in cautiously, though access was quickly restricted once certain details emerged. The cave walls were marked, not with natural erosion, but with carvings. Thousands of them. Simple lines at first, spirals, stars, clusters of circles, but deeper in, the carvings took shape. Childlike figures, trees with eyes, stones arranged in rings, and everywhere small handprints, some barely larger than a toddler's palm, pressed into the stone with faint impressions as though made in clay. Most disturbing were the tunnels. Some of them were impossibly narrow, winding into pitch-black silence. Others opened into circular chambers with smoothed floors, as if worn down by many feet over time. No animal bones were found, no tools, just silence and the sound of slow dripping echoing endlessly in the dark. One chamber in particular became known, unofficially, as the chorus room. It earned the name not because of anything visible, but because of what people claimed to hear. Visitors described a low hum, barely perceptible, that vibrated through the stone when they stood in the center. Some said it matched no frequency they could replicate. Others claimed it changed when more than one person entered. One researcher stayed behind after the others left, trying to record the sound. He was found asleep in the chamber hours later, cradling his recorder like a child. The tape captured nothing but static, and for 6 seconds, the unmistakable sound of a child laughing. Not long after, the caves were sealed. Officially due to structural instability. Unofficially, the villagers had had enough. They didn't want people digging any deeper. Whatever lay beneath Bramble Hollow, they said, was meant to stay buried. But that hasn't stopped the questions, because the carvings on those walls matched those found in the attic drawings of Thomas Allcroft. And deeper in the cave, carved near the ceiling of the lowest chamber, was a single word, scrawled in a child's uneven hand. Elsie.
The year 2001 brought Bramble Hollow its most recent and perhaps most unsettling disappearance. Her name was Rachel Mearns, a quiet, bright 13-year-old who had moved to the area with her parents only 3 months before. They'd purchased one of the few habitable cottages near the forest's edge, unaware of the local reputation. Rachel, an only child, had a fondness for exploring and often filmed her walks with a small camcorder, a gift from her grandfather. She vanished on October 3rd. It was a gray afternoon. Her mother said Rachel had planned to film the changing leaves near the edge of the hollow. She left just after lunch, wearing a red scarf and carrying her camera in a canvas satchel. She told her parents she'd be back before tea. She never returned. A search began that evening. Within hours, over 30 locals were combing the forest's perimeter, careful not to step beyond the boundary stones. By morning, helicopters joined in. Still nothing. 2 days later, her camcorder was found. It was lying gently on a patch of moss, completely undamaged, about 30 feet into the tree line, far enough that most locals wouldn't dare venture without reason. Its battery was drained, but the tape inside was intact. The footage was reviewed by authorities. Most of it was ordinary. Rachel walking through the trees, humming softly, commenting on the golden leaves and the mushrooms that look like tiny umbrellas. The sun filtered through the canopy. Everything was calm. Until the final minute. She pauses by one of the boundary stones, tilting the camera toward it. "This one's cracked," she says, zooming in. "Looks like someone—" She cuts off. A sound, faint and melodic, drifts in. Something not quite music, not quite wind. The camera pans left, as if she's turning to listen. "Do you hear that?" she whispers. Silence follows. She takes a step forward, then another. The camera tilts abruptly as though slipping from her grip. It lands in the moss, still recording. The last frame shows the edge of her red scarf drifting into view, then vanishing. Not pulled, not yanked, just gone. The remaining footage is still. No footsteps, no voices, no sign of struggle. Just wind through leaves and a soft, constant hum, one that, audio experts later said, didn't match any known natural frequency. The scarf was never found. Neither was Rachel.
Her parents moved away within the year, their house left to ivy and rot. The camcorder was quietly returned to them. They never released the footage. But those who've seen it, officers, analysts, archivists, agree on one thing. The moment she disappears, the trees don't sway, the leaves don't move, even the insects go still. Like the world held its breath and didn't exhale.
Bramble Hollow today is a quiet smear on an aging map. No post office, no school, just a scattering of old stone cottages and twisted lanes that lead nowhere fast. The population has dwindled to fewer than 30. Most who remain are elderly, their families rooted here through generations, too old to leave or too stubborn. From a distance, the forest still looks beautiful, majestic even. Tall oaks and yews with branches like outstretched arms. Wildflowers bloom at the edge of the tree line in spring. Birds wheel across the sky in great arcs. But come closer, and the charm fades. There's something off about the quiet. Even on clear mornings, birdsong seems to vanish as one nears the woods. It's subtle, the kind of silence that doesn't register until it lingers too long. The wind doesn't move the branches the way you'd expect. Leaves sway in patterns that seem rehearsed. Tourists occasionally stumble upon the village, lured by scenic routes or accidental detours. A few take photographs. Fewer stay the night. Those who do often leave early, not because of fear, but because something feels wrong in a way they can't name. There are no signs warning people away, no fences, just the old stones half sunken in moss and the paths that no longer welcome footsteps. Modern technology fares poorly here. Phones lose signal, GPS glitches, cameras struggle to focus, drones crash without explanation. One documentary team attempted to film a special in the hollow. Their equipment failed within minutes. The footage that did survive was filled with static, flickering frames, and a strange audio distortion, a low hum layered beneath all other sound. The crew left before sundown. They never released the episode. Of the villagers who remain, few will speak on record, but a pattern emerges if you listen. None will go near the whispering tree, none allow their grandchildren to visit, and none, absolutely none, own wind chimes. They say it's because of what the wind sometimes carries. There's a story of a woman who placed a chime on her porch one spring. She said she liked the sound, soft, calming. It rang for 3 days. Then, one evening, it changed. The pattern was wrong, not melodic. It started to echo a tune her daughter used to sing. The chime disappeared the next morning. And so did the woman. Her house stands empty still. Bramble Hollow isn't cursed, as some would claim. It's simply waiting. And somehow it always knows when someone is listening. The forest edges are clearer now, not because the trees have changed, but because the people around them have grown cautious. You can tell who's local by how they walk. They keep to the gravel paths. They don't pause near the stones. And they never, ever cross into Bramble Hollow after dark. Still, the stories haven't stopped. Teenagers dare each other to spend the night near the whispering tree,
Most make it until midnight, then return pale and silent, claiming they felt watched, like something was studying them from behind the bark. One boy said he saw faces in the knots of the tree trunk, not faces carved or etched, real ones, breathing, shifting. None of it ever shows up on film. Audio recorders capture only silence, sometimes broken by faint laughter or a melody that vanishes when played back. Wildlife cameras glitch, motion detectors fail. A pair of researchers once tried to monitor the area using thermal imaging, but their devices recorded no heat signatures, even in daybreak light. But it isn't just about the failures of technology. It's what people feel. A local postman delivering mail to a cottage near the edge once said he heard a child giggle behind him, though there were no children for miles. He turned to find the leaves on the ground arranged into 12 perfect circles, each no wider than a dinner plate. By the next morning, the leaves were gone. Others speak of hearing humming, soft and childlike, coming from beneath the ground. It's never loud, never aggressive, just present, like a lullaby leaking through the soil. Some of the villagers have adapted to it. They leave offerings at the edge of the hollow, not out of belief, they say, but tradition. Toys, ribbons, tiny shoes tied with twine. One man leaves carved figurines, always a pair, always faceless. When asked why, he simply shrugs and says, "It keeps things quiet." The authorities, when contacted, treat Bramble Hollow like any other rural space. Missing persons reports are marked unresolved. Land surveys note nothing unusual apart from uncommonly dense tree growth and high levels of magnetic interference. And so it stays, unstudied, unclaimed. A sliver of ancient land that breathes just beneath the threshold of the known world. Those who live nearby often whisper the same phrase when the wind picks up where the air suddenly stills. It's listening again. Sleep doesn't come easily near Bramble Hollow, but for those willing to sit in silence, there's a strange calm that settles in just before dawn. A lull in the world when even the birds seem to hold their breath. It's during this hour, wrapped in fog and frost, that one can hear the trees breathing. Not literally, of course, not in a way science could measure, but in the way old homes creak as they settle, or how the sea hums beneath a pier at low tide. If you listen gently, without strain, you'll hear it, a rhythm deep in the pines, and within that rhythm something older still, a memory that doesn't belong to you, drifting just beyond reach. In this stillness, it's easier to imagine what it must be like to vanish without a trace, to slip between the moss and root, to be absorbed by a place that never truly let you go, a place where time folds and laughter lingers like perfume in an empty room. Maybe Bramble Hollow doesn't take the children. Maybe it remembers them, echoes them. Maybe the humming isn't meant to lure, but to comfort. In those last few minutes before the sun rises, when the mist curls along the ground and your thoughts begin to blur at the edges, the hollow feels
patient. It doesn't demand fear, only respect. The stones will remain, exactly 12, their surfaces warmed by unseen hands. The tree will still whisper, though the words remain just out of reach. And somewhere, deep underground, the carvings will persist, telling a story no one quite understands, in a language older than names. Let the wind carry your final thoughts tonight. Let the quiet embrace you like a blanket pulled over your shoulders. Let Bramble Hollow fade softly, like mist retreating into trees. There's no need to worry. You're not walking there. You're only listening. And the hollow, at least for now, listens back.